Hello, welcome to Creating Segues between View Controllers. In this particular video, we will be looking at the components that comprise a segue, how to prepare for a segue, and passing data through a segue. Right now we have our entry point to our journal app set to our main storyboard, which embeds our entry list into this view controller. We also have a create entry storyboard, but we have no way of getting to this create entry storyboard at the moment. So inside of our entry list storyboard, let's go ahead and create a bar button item, and we will drag that into our navigation, and we will change this to a system item of add. Now we can drag in a storyboard reference, and we can set that to our create entry. If we control drag from our add button to the create entry, we are given these segue options. For now, we will present modally. We will go over in detail in the next video of what the different options are and what they do. But for now, we want to talk about this segue. Since we control dragged from the add button, or this plus button, to this create entry, it created this segue, and it will transition from our entry list view controller to our create entry view controller. So let's run our application, and we will see how that works. So hitting the add button, it will display our create entry. But right now we have no way of getting back to our previous view controller. So there are several ways to do that. We can go to our create entry storyboard, and we can put a cancel button up here, or when the save button is tapped, we can dismiss our view controller. For now, we will just do a cancel button. So we will do another bar button item in the top right, and we will name this cancel. Or if we wanted to, we can switch that to be cancel, done. Or if we want to get a little fancy, we can do a stop, which makes it into this little X. So I'm going to leave it at the X. We then need to hook that button up to an action. So we can create an IB action, and we can call this dismiss, and we can dismiss the view controller. And there is a dismiss method. We can go to this create entry, right click on our view controller, and hook up that dismiss action to the bar button item. So if we run the application right now, it will come up. We can select the add button to bring up that create entry. And if we hit the X button, it will actually crash our app. And that's because we used the wrong dismiss method. So if we go back to our create view controller, and actually it's highlighting the line that it crashes on, and we have to call this dismiss animated. And this actually dismisses the view controller that was presented modally, whereas this other dismiss doesn't really say what it does, and that's because it's not able to be used by us. So we select animated, true, completion nil, and when we run the app again, we will be able to hit the add button and then hit the X to dismiss. Let's take a deeper look at a segue. If we go to our entry list storyboard, let's delete the segue that we created and delete the add button, and control drag from our cell to our create entry. We will select show, and then select the segue, and we will assign an identifier to it. This identifier will allow us to access this segue in code. Let's go to the create entry storyboard and get rid of our X. And then in the entry list, end of the file, we will create an extension on entry list, and we will implement a method called prepare for segue. This prepare for segue will allow us to do some additional functionality to be able to pass information to our destination that we are going to. In order to do that, we have to check which segue identifier we are dealing with. In this case, we want to look for our create entry segue that we just created, and then we want to unwrap the destination into a VC variable, which stands for view controller. So we will grab the destination, but notice this destination is a UI view controller. And we don't want a UI view controller, we want our create entry view controller that we created. So we will cast it as a create entry. If that fails, we want to return early. The next step, we need to go to our create entry view controller and create a property called entry, which will be an optional entry. And when we go through this prepare for segue, we want to assign an entry to this view controller based off the entry that is inside of our entry list. So if we go back to our entry list, we need to get that entry that we want to pass to this destination. So we can say let index path is equal to the cell that is selected, and anytime we select a cell, this index path for selected row gets set on the table view. Now all we have to do is create an entry based off of that index path, and we have a method on our entry controller called getEntry that takes in an index path, and then we can set our ViewController.entry equal to the entry. And to test that that worked, we can go over to our create entry, and inside the view.didLoad, we can print our entry. So if we run this right now, we can select one of our journal entries, and notice that printed nil. That's because inside of our view controllers, or storyboards, we have a navigation controller, and in the create entry storyboard, we have another navigation controller, and it's not knowing how to handle both those navigation controllers. And we're going to talk about the navigation controller in more detail in the next video, but for now we have to move this arrow to our create entry and run the application again. And now when we select an entry, it will print that actual entry out. In the next video, we will cover the options for navigating between multiple view controllers.